I was about 13 or 14 and I was babysitting 2 boys for some church members. I had done this before and the kids loved me and the parents were very comfortable with me. This was a night where they were supposed to be gone the entire night, as late as 2:30 in the morning. I was doing it for free that day because they were going to do something church related and that's just how I rolled back then. Anyway, the house they lived in was an apartment complex. You know, one of those small ones that had 2 floors and 4 doors on each level. They were on the bottom floor with 2 bedrooms on either side of the apartment, with the kitchen on the left and the living room on the right, and the sliding glass door to a small patio and a public bathroom next to the front door. It was about 1:30 a.m. and I knew they would be getting home soon. The kids were knocked out after me practically begging them to call it a night in endless bedtime stories, and I had just finished my homework. They didn't have cable. This was before Netflix became an online service, so they had a couple of DVDs and VHSs to watch. So I grabbed one of the Land Before Time movies to make the night go quicker. I was already very tired and I had nodded off a couple times. About 30 minutes went by and I could hear knocking on the front door. Knowing the parents had a key, I did nothing but sit there in the dark with the TV glowing. Being a paranoid person and who watches and reads enough horror, I grabbed the baseball bat that was next to the couch. What happened next will haunt me forever. I heard a small voice, a young woman's. "Oh dear, that won't help you." My heart stopped and I realized that the patio door didn't have the blinds shut. My eyes shift slowly to the sliding door and I see someone on the patio staring in. I couldn't make anything out, other than that they were very short and wide. I screamed and ran into the kids' room. Thankfully they were still asleep. Sadly, this was before I had a cell phone and there were no cordless landlines I could access. All I did was push the dresser in front of the door and I stared out of the only window in the room. That's when it became dark as a shadow loomed across the window. The knocking started again and the woman's voice called out, "Come on, dearie, I won't hurt you. Please come out." The window was being knocked so hard that I was afraid it was going to break. The kids finally woke up and they were screaming and scared. I was a big girl and I could at the time lift my own weight, but knowing I had 2 kids with me, I became vulnerable and afraid. Not too long after this, I hear the father yell out, "Hey, who the hell are you?" And the person ran off. The front door opened shortly after and there was harsh knocking on the kids' bedroom door. Thankfully, it was the parents, and after I let them in and put the dresser back, I explained what happened and they called the police. When they arrived, they obviously found nothing, but the bushes that hide the patio were obviously cut up and ripped up to get through. I babysat for them once more after this, but they moved away about 5 months later, and I never babysat anyone ever again. And again to this day, I know the woman was long gone, but every time I hear a knock, a chill runs through me. When I was 14, I was asked to babysit my 3 younger cousins, aged 8, 4, and 1, in an extremely rural, mountainous part of Pennsylvania. My aunt and uncle had a wedding to go to over an hour away. It wouldn't be back until very late. Their house was situated on a steep mountainside. Their back deck had a 15-foot drop onto a rocky hill, below leading down to a river. Their closest neighbors were about a half-mile away, and the closest main road was a mile away. And at night, there were no lights to be seen anywhere around them. Basically, it was in the middle of nowhere, and you would have to know where you are going to get there. You don't just accidentally end up here. My aunt and uncle left us with some pizza and their cell phone number next to their landline and headed out. This was the early 2000s, and I didn't have a cell phone, but even if I did, I wouldn't get reception there anyway. The baby was already asleep. The 4-year-old wasn't feeling well and was quietly watching TV in the living room as he dozed off, and the 8-year-old was playing Guitar Hero with me up on the loft. The loft overlooked the living room to the left, where I could keep an eye on the 4-year-old, and there was a huge window that overlooked the driveway to the right. This description of the driveway is an important detail to the story. The road that led to their house ran straight into their forked driveway. It was a dead-end road. The house was as far as you could go. Go to the left part of the driveway, there is a large open carport, and that's where my aunt and uncle and anyone who ever visited parked. The right part of the driveway led down a very short but very steep hill to a large leveled out area and ended against the garage door that opened to the basement of the house. It was never used as a garage, but served as my uncle's man cave and where he spent most of his time. Right beside the garage door, there was a normal door with a window so you could see right in. But this driveway was exclusively used by the kids as a play area because it was the only flat yard-like area on the property. And being on a mountainside, there isn't much room to safely play otherwise. No cars ever drove down there, ever. There are too many toys and bikes in the way, and friends and family knew this. It was about 10 p.m., pitch black outside, no moon to illuminate the area either. My cousin and I were still playing Guitar Hero when headlights caught the corner of my eye, and it wasn't my aunt's minivan headlights. They were huge truck headlights with those roof lights you often see on Jeeps or those big trucks. Not only that, the truck was going down the right driveway, the kids' play area, and this was not my aunt and uncle. This was not anyone they knew. Panic and dread filled my body. I was a small teenage girl, alone in an isolated house on a mountain at night with 3 children in my care. In a terrified voice, I asked my cousin, "Who is that? Jake, do you know whose truck that is?" And then he looked panicked. "No, I've never seen that truck before," he replied. I quickly ushered him downstairs, still unsure what to do, but the 2 little ones were still sleeping down there and I wanted to make sure they were safe. I checked on the baby and then grabbed the phone to call 911. Then I started to hear the metal garage door being shaken violently. No one ever opened that garage door. More panic fills me. I hear them try the door beside it. The metal doorknob is now jiggling. No one was actually knocking. It's not like they were checking to see if my uncle was down there. Plus the lights were out. It was dark down there and they knew no one was down here. They were definitely breaking in. The door leading to the basement stairs were right next to the phone, so I could clearly hear all of this going on. I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob, just in case they did make it into the basement. My heart was practically jumping out of my chest. I'm talking to the 911 dispatcher as my 8-year-old cousin clings to my arm. The operator is calm and trying to keep us calm, but I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could get up there, assuming they didn't get totally lost on this mountainside in the pitch dark. I just kept thinking that we were screwed. We are dead. This is how I die. The operator asked for the number my aunt and uncle left me so she could have another dispatcher call them to let them know the situation. I turned around to grab the paper with a number on it. To my absolute horror, I see a man peering in the large sliding glass door. A huge, burly, what had to have been a 6'4" man with long, scraggly red hair and a big, bushy beard. And what made it worse, he was grinning at me. Grinning in a way that still scares me to this day. Meanwhile, I had to have looked like a terrified deer in the headlights. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. There was also a second man behind him that I couldn't see as well. I have no idea what he looked like, but he was equally as tall, but maybe a bit more lanky than the larger man at the sliding glass door. I screamed into the phone, "Oh God, they are here." And before the 911 operator could say anything, my 8-year-old cousin goes, "Mr. Jim?" His voice was very confused. It wasn't like my cousin was happy or even relieved to see him. I asked him, "You know who that is?" But before my cousin could answer, I turned my attention to the man in the door. "Hey, I'm on the phone with the police," I shouted. The man stared at me hard for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, like deciding what he wanted to do next. But he then just backed away into the darkness. What seemed like an eternity later, I saw the truck lights back out of the driveway and then back down the road until they disappeared. I was still scared shitless, and so was my cousin. He had only met that guy a few times, an acquaintance of his dad. It wasn't like it was a close family friend, and obviously because again, he went down the wrong driveway. Visitors never go down that way. The 911 operator asked for a description of the man, then told me they'd gotten in touch with my aunt and uncle and they were on their way home. She stayed on the phone with me until a police officer showed up a bit later to make sure the men were gone, and they stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home so they could ask them some questions. My uncle was furious. Not at me for calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim guy. He muttered something like, "I'm going to F him up." My aunt was mad at my uncle and told him to tell Jim to never come back again. I didn't know this at the time, but as I grew up, I learned that my uncle had a drug problem. I don't know what Mr. Jim or his accomplice were doing, or what they would have done if I wasn't on the phone with the police. But that grin was not a friendly one. It was sinister. And again, he also had to have known my uncle was not there, because the basement was dark. He would have seen through the window of the basement door. He had also tried lifting the garage door, something not even my uncle did. He intended to break into the basement, that much is clear to me. There is no other explanation. I never babysat for them again, and I don't think I ever went back up there because not long after, my aunt divorced my uncle and moved out. I just want to say this all happened when I was 18. I was young, innocent, and naive. Now that I'm in my mid-20s, I would never let this happen again. It was my freshman year at college, and as one could imagine, I was excited to be on my own for once in my life. So much so that I decided I was going to take summer classes on campus. That way I wouldn't have to worry about coming in when the big crowd of freshmen came in, and I also would already know where everything was. Plus it meant I could get away from my parents faster. You see, I never dated anyone through high school, so I thought I would find my one true love at college, because of course, that's what all the movies told me. About 2 weeks went by, and me and one of my roommates, I had 4, were hanging out in the lounge area showing off pictures from Instagram of our friends, family, etc. Well, my roommate Tracy showed me a picture of her and these 2 guys. One of the guys was Tracy's boyfriend, and the other was Tracy's boyfriend's best friend, Sean. Now Sean was very attractive, and I told Tracy that he was hot. And she told me that he went to the tech college near us and that he was single. Now a day or 2 goes by after this, and she tells me she told Sean that I was interested in him, and that he wanted to know if he could follow me on Instagram so he could message me. At the time, I trusted Tracy because she seemed like a cool and chill girl, so I told her yes. But I wish I never told her that. At first, it was okay. I talked to Sean for about a week before I was comfortable enough to give him my phone number. At first, he seemed super sweet. He would always send me a text message in the morning and telling me to have a good day at class and that he couldn't wait to FaceTime me that night. And we would FaceTime every night. At first, I loved it because I never had a boy give me so much attention. And like I said before, I had never dated anyone, so I was just over the moon that he was even interested enough in me to talk to me. But it started to get annoying. He would text me almost every second of the day and try to FaceTime me non-stop. When I wouldn't respond to him, he would ask if I was okay, why I wasn't answering him, and if I was seeing another guy. And that if I was seeing another guy, that it would make him really mad. I, of course, once seeing the messages, would try to reassure him that I was okay and that I wasn't seeing anyone. Like I said in the beginning, I was young and naive, so I didn't see it as a red flag. Things kept going downhill, though. It came to a point where he started asking for pictures of me. Either just selfies or pictures of me in the mirror. I wouldn't send them though because I wasn't comfortable. And he would brush it off, saying that was fine and I could send him pictures of myself to him whenever I was ready. One day I was in class for a long time because it was a lab, and it started at 7 p.m. and wouldn't end till 10 p.m. that night. For those of you that don't know, labs in college can last 2 to 4 hours, and mine just happened to be 3 hours that night. Once class ended, I headed up to my dorm and took out my phone. I clicked the button on the side, lighting up the screen. I had 380 unread texts, 10 missed calls, and 3 voicemails from Sean. Before I could even react or even read all the messages, my phone started to ring. Instead of being Sean, it was my dad. He had called me to make sure I was alright because he got an alert from the phone company that I had gotten all those messages. I was still on his phone plan. I don't know why, but I lied to him and laughed it off, just telling him that I was in a group chat with a bunch of girls from school. Once I got off the phone with my dad, I quickly went to look at the messages I had gotten. Most of them were demanding, like why I wasn't answering him and how he would come find me if I didn't. The voicemails were crude and mostly of him saying how he was going to find me, and when he did, he was going to punish me for not answering him. After this, I just completely blocked him on everything I could think of. I was completely freaked out about the whole thing. About a week goes by and I start to slowly forget about the incident, trying not to think much about it. At least that's what I was trying to do. That whole week though, I felt like someone was watching me, but I brushed it off as me being paranoid. At the end of the week, my roommate Tracy, who I had been avoiding, came up to me shouting at me saying how I broke Sean's heart, and that he had called her crying, saying he didn't understand why I stopped talking to him. I couldn't even get a word in with her because of how fast she was talking. She finally called me a self-centered bitch and walked away. I went to class right after that, not realizing I forgot to lock my dorm room. You see, I lived with 4 girls and each girl had their own room, which would lock from the outside with a key. But when I came back from class, I noticed my door cracked open slightly. My heart dropped into my stomach. I hesitated going in and my hands were shaking terribly, but I finally got the nerve to push the door open. Nothing. There was nothing out of place, it seemed. Even though there was nothing out of place, I could have sworn I closed the door before leaving for class. Though I don't remember if I had locked it or not. I know for sure I closed it. So I asked my roommates, including Tracy, if anyone had gone into my room today, and they all denied it, even Tracy. But I just knew in my heart that someone had to have been in there. Just like everything else, I tried my best to brush it off, but I just couldn't. So one weekend, when I knew that all my roommates were going to be out of town, I switched dorm buildings and rooms with the girl that I had gotten to be close friends with. After I moved in with her, I told her all that had happened, and she said that she would walk with me to my classes. Thankfully, we had most of our classes together, except the night lab that I had. And even then, she would walk with me to my lab, and sometimes even wait until it was done to walk with me back to the dorm. One night, though, she had gone out of town to see her parents or something. I was walking back from my lab, and it had gone on really late that night again. I heard someone walking behind me, but I didn't pay any attention to it, since class was just let out. But as I was walking, I could hear the steps getting closer, so I started to pick up my walking speed. At this point, I could tell someone was following me, and I was too afraid to look back. As the footsteps increased and got faster, I started running as fast as I could. Now let me tell you, I'm not athletic by any means. Somehow though, adrenaline probably, I was able to sprint to my dorm building, hearing someone still running behind me. I thankfully already had my key card out to get into the building, and I swiped it on the door and slammed it behind me. Looking up from slamming the door, I see someone who's probably about 10 feet away from the door, staring at me. Even though the person's hoodie was up and I couldn't see their face much, I could just see that they were looking at me, and I knew it was Sean. Not wasting any more time, I go to the RA that was up that night, bawling, telling him what had just happened. He called the police, and I told them everything that happened. But they basically said they couldn't do anything since I didn't see his face, even if I thought it was Sean, and that it was a possibility I was just paranoid since it was nighttime and I was walking by myself. After all this, I called my friend and told her what happened, and she never went out of town again if I had my late night classes. I eventually decided college wasn't for me and I dropped out. I moved back to my home state and went to cosmetology school and became a hairdresser. I still haven't dated anyone yet though. Maybe it's the fear of something like that happening again. I don't know. I do know that I'm super careful with who I talk to now and who I give my social media and phone number to. I'm still scared to go places by myself, even though it's been years and I'm states away. I was 16 and we met on Facebook. We went to a school nearby and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together and ended up dating. The first time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor on for house arrest and he wouldn't tell anyone why. Red flag number 1. And since he was a minor, we couldn't find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house without them knowing, or even around town at the YMCA camp. I was rebellious and naive. Things started to get weird when I noticed that his family was pretty odd. One day we were having intercourse in his bedroom and I saw his father looking through the blinds. I screamed and called him out and his dad ran off. The guy I was talking to told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us, so this wasn't the first time. I went to leave and his mom was doing crack in the kitchen, so I decided it was time to break up with him. This is when it got bad. He started crying and told me that he's in cancer treatment and that's why he needs me. He doesn't have long to live, blah blah blah. I believed him and told him we could be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never had the same class, luckily. He would just stand outside of my classroom looking in until it was passing period. When I would leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow about 10 to 15 feet behind me to my next period. Then he would stand outside the classroom again. I was too intimidated to say something to him, as he was tall and a heavy-set guy, so I just let it happen for weeks. It started to progress to where he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me, despite living across town, and walk 10 to 15 feet behind me all the way to my house. He would just stand outside and staring up at the window until around the time my parents got home, and then he would finally leave. Finally, I told him to screw off and leave me alone. I told him we could no longer be friends or acquaintances and to forget about me. However, that escalated things way further. I started getting about 150 plus calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me. And the other half were him singing me love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to just magically get a new one and leave more messages. I woke up one day to see that overnight he had left me one of those dancing or singing snowmen on my porch. He had stabbed it in the head and the knife was still sticking out. He covered it in his liquid deodorant that I had previously mentioned liking the smell of, and I noticed there was a hole where the little song recording device was. When I pressed the hand, it was not the regular Frosty the Snowman song that played. It was his voice singing eerily, "I'm going to have you forever, I'm never going to let you be." I was done at this point and I told my parents, who contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my home with me. One day he ran at me like he was going to tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug, it was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5'1" and maybe 90 pounds at the time, and he ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried and he started crying too before running off. He then left me a voicemail later that night apologizing in song. This one night is the night I'll never forget, and it's the reason we got a restraining order and my dad got a gun. I woke up one evening for no reason, just fully awake. I got up to go to my kitchen to get a glass of water to relax, and in the reflection on my fridge, I saw movement in my backyard. I couldn't see well because it was so dark outside and so light inside, so I went to the back sliding glass door to get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of a 6-foot-something man just standing outside the door. My stalker was in my backyard. He was just staring at me. I yelled and my parents got up, but he was gone by the time my dad went outside. There's a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way down to the grounds, so it's possible he could have been on the top of the patio looking directly into my bedroom window before. I haven't seen him in person since, but every 6 months or so he makes a new Facebook and tries to friend request me. I just block it and I report it every time. Before anyone asks why I have a stranger on my Snapchat in the first place, I'm going to clarify that whenever people add me, whether it's from my Instagram or just quick add, I always add them back. However, I don't remember adding this guy back. So basically, this started yesterday when me and my cousin got home from a party around 10 p.m. We were sitting in my living room for a while just watching Netflix, and nothing seemed weird during that time. At one point, I drunkenly said to my cousin, "Look behind you," because we always mess with each other like that, except she was pretty sure that she saw something move in the window behind her. Not thinking anything of it, I just figured she was trying to scare me back, and I pretty much forgot about it. This was until out of nowhere, a while later on, my dog jumped up and ran to the front door and started barking really aggressively. We kept yelling at her to stop, but she wouldn't leave it alone for at least another 3 minutes. I thought maybe she could have heard a noise from the TV or something that scared her, but the movie we were watching had ended like 30 minutes ago, and we were both just sitting in silence on our phones. Keep in mind, this happened around 12 a.m. After this happened, I was kind of nervous and pretty confused, but my dog had done this a few times before. So once again, I tried to just ignore it and not really think too much about it. It was around 1 a.m. when me and my cousin decided to go upstairs and start getting ready to go to sleep. I was laying down on my phone checking Snapchat when I decided to open Snap Maps. Then I saw it. Someone was at my house with me. I started thinking of all the possibilities of who would be that close to me. The guy's name was Sebastian. At this point, I was really confused and started to get worried because I don't even know a Sebastian. And like I stated in the very beginning, I don't ever remember adding back a Sebastian. I went back downstairs to check and make sure all the doors were locked. In my house, we have an alarm system where every time you open a door, it will chime to let you know. For some reason, it was unplugged, meaning if any doors were being opened, whether it be the shed door, backyard gate, or just any door leading to my house, no one in our house would be notified. I asked my cousin if she unplugged it, and she said she didn't even know that we had it. I was genuinely worried now because when I checked the snap map, it said he was last seen an hour ago. And an hour ago was when my dog started viciously barking at the front door for no reason. The more I thought about everything, the more it seemed to be connected, but there was really nothing I could do as I already checked downstairs and locked all of the doors. I actually do have multiple cameras around my house, so I decided I would just check them in the morning, because I needed to get the password from my mother anyway. So I'll skip to the next day. It's currently the next afternoon now, and I'm still waiting to check the cameras, but nothing weird has happened since last night. Although when I last checked Snap Maps, it said he was last seen 11 minutes ago and still around my house. I did, however, send him a chat that said, "Who are you?" And he just replied back with, "Who are you?" So I didn't answer. His Snapchat score is 28,000, so it isn't likely this is a fake account. I won't know anything else until I check the cameras, and I'm not really sure what to do, because I don't have proof of anything yet that I could bring to the cops, and it's making me a bit perturbed while being at my house now. Fast forward. Okay, so today's literally been crazy. Me and my cousin have been both pretty freaked out, and I'll start with last night. My cousin and I had been hearing strange things all night again. We finally got the password to check the cameras, and we checked the footage this morning from last night around 2 a.m. The figure was mostly all black, and we could hardly make anything out. We did call the police, and they came this morning and checked the footage. They also looked around our house just to make sure nobody was still lurking around. They said they would patrol around our neighborhood when it got dark for the next few nights, too. They made a report on the man trespassing, and we gave them as much information as we could so they can hopefully find him. We both feel a little bit better, but it's really unnerving to know somebody actually was in fact lurking around our house the past few nights. Neither of us can figure out what he was doing or trying to do. He just looked like he was walking around, but like I said, we really have no clue what he wants. This whole ordeal has been very stressful and scary for me and my cousin, and the rest of my family. I'm still very shaken up and worried that he may return with worse intentions.